W5.
I got an Instagram message.
When the search for love becomes deadly.
She is involved in something horrible and she can't see it.
How much money are they ripping Canadians off of?
Between $100 and $300 million a year.
And online romance leads to a dark world of organized crime.
They were going to kill all my family. They said they were going to behead me.
It was very clear that there was something more at play.
I just can't believe that she fell for this.
CTV's W5 with Avery Haines, Peter Ackman, Sandy Rinaldo, and Lisa Laflamme. Here is Avery Haines.
Welcome to W5. You've likely heard the term catfishing, where scammers lure victims into online relationships and then convince them to send money. Well, a W5 investigation reveals an alarming reality of who is often behind those scams. It is a vast and sophisticated crime network with tentacles that spread around the globe, including here in Canada.
I have been terrified, abused, and terrorized for the past 22 months. I have lost everything.
Ominous words in a letter found on the seat of a car in a parking lot outside Vancouver. The 3-page letter ends with this.
You are only reading this because I am dead.
This invisible man took everything that she had worked for, her family, her friends, her home, and he also took her life.
He killed her.
He killed her. Yeah, he killed her yeah.
The invisible man calls himself Ryan Scott. The woman he killed, Karen Ringham's sister, Colleen.
She was a beautiful woman. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. She was a very striking woman.
And what did she do for a living?
She worked for a small company and looked after the books. She worked really, really hard because she was by herself.
By herself, but looking for love. She never found the person that she was going to spend the rest of her life with.
She was in a relationship with a gentleman for many years. You know, they were a couple, and then things fell apart.
And so, at the age of 59, Colleen turned to online dating to try to ease that loneliness. Do you remember when your sister first told you, hey, I've met this guy and he's something special?
Yeah. She had been on this particular site and she'd met this Ryan. And she was just over the moon happy.
Colleen and Ryan's relationship started out innocently enough. September 15th, 2016, Ryan sends a selfie and a text about how he loves making friends. Over the course of that very first chat, they talk about their mutual failed relationships. Ryan tells Colleen she's the woman he's been searching for. He sends her pictures of his 17-year-old daughter. Colleen sends a photo back. Even though Ryan said he was overseas working on an oil rig, to Colleen, this was a thrilling new world of online dating. Ryan messaged her first thing in the morning and the last thing at night, sending increasingly loving messages and poems. The two began planning a life together.
I think he just knew how to do the talk to make her feel really good. All of a sudden, they're talking a life together in marriage. And so she's telling me that her and Ryan are going to travel the world. They're going to live in all sorts of different countries. And she's always wanted to do this.
When your sister calls up and within months of telling you about Ryan, there are red flags that are going off for you.
Absolutely. I said to her, I said, do you really feel he's true to his word? She would just say, oh, he loves me, I love him. He's the man that I want forever.
Within a few months, the man Colleen wanted forever, but never once met in person, starts asking for money. About $1,800 American to move a trunk that Ryan said was stuck in customs in Turkey and was filled with money he was owed. Colleen agrees to pay a company called TSS Diplomatic Services to release the trunk, and Ryan promises he'll pay her back. But that one request spirals into constant demands over the next 2 years for ever increasing amounts of money.
You've done a little bit of investigating, right? Some detective work.
I've done some looking into stuff.
Karen has been scouring through Colleen's belongings, trying to unravel the mystery of her sister's last months alive.
Were you able to get anything out of the iPad?
I got some stuff out of the iPad. There's lots of messages back and forth.
Emails that are a roadmap to an elaborate international scam involving numerous actors. There's her loving Ryan, who was working on an oil rig in the Tasman Sea, who plays the good guy up against the other players in this scam, the threatening diplomatic services agent, a CEO, and customs officials who bombard Colleen for money. When she can no longer pay, she's threatened with jail because they said she had broken the law by paying bribes to get the trunk moved around the world.
TSS Diplomatic Services are the people that are contacting her all the time and wanting more money. And they are threatening her mostly with jail time or arrest, or the authorities know your name and they know where you live. And she's terrified. She's absolutely terrified.
Do you know how much money your sister gave to Ryan?
Close to $1 million.
Close to $1 million.
Yeah, about $960,000 she gave to Ryan and the whole scam. Just give me a moment. I just can't believe that she fell for this. Yeah, okay.
On October 8, 2018, 2 years after meeting Ryan online and then being tricked into believing she had broken the law, Colleen typed out a 3-page letter. I was advised yesterday that the authorities in Toronto know my first name, and it's only a matter of time before they come to arrest me. Colleen writes that she's too old and too law-abiding to end up in jail. And then she documented the names and details of the people who had ripped her off. The next day, Colleen drove to a parking lot in Delta, British Columbia, put the letter by her side, and ended her life. Officially, it was a suicide, but her sister Karen believes the scammers essentially killed Colleen.
She saw no way, obviously, of being able to get out of this. But that's what this Ryan, that's what he did. That's what he did to her. And I guess it's a horrible thing to say. I feel relief for her. This horror story that she lived in secret, all by herself, was over.
The photos Colleen fell in love with are not Ryan Scott. He doesn't exist. W5 has learned they are of an innocent Canadian man, Tommy Keane, whose identity was stolen by fraudsters. So who is behind scams like these?
If that report wasn't made, we don't stitch it together so quickly.
Mike Kelly and Tim Trotter, 2 detectives across the country in Toronto, have a fairly good idea, even though they haven't worked on Colleen's case. They spearheaded an exhaustive investigation that will change everything you thought you knew about just who's behind romance scams and where they're operating out of.
When we hear about a romance scam, we think about one woman being scammed by one guy. That really is not the case.
No, not at all. It's one individual against an entire network, a sophisticated group of individuals with specialization in false documents, in talking on the phone, with specialization in talking about financial matters, individuals who are quality control operators, people who facilitate logistics, people who play different roles and different characters as the need moves along.
The people who prey on that are experts at it. That's why we're kind of passionate about this, is that fraud is probably one of the most devastating criminal acts that someone can be the victim of.
Coming up,
they recruited some of the top academic performers.
a remorseless fraternity of hardened criminals goes worldwide
We understand them to have a presence in 26 countries around the world.
when W5 continues.
Two sisters, that's a beautiful shot.
Yeah, that was great.
Karen Ringham is remembering the good times with her sister Colleen.
That's a nice one.
Yeah. Yeah, we were great together.
But it's these photos on the iPad Colleen left behind that tell the story of her last few months of life. Picture after picture of everything she once owned, the furniture, art, even the Christmas ribbons, all being cataloged for sale as Colleen tried desperately to raise money, the victim of an elaborate scheme that bilked her out of almost $1 million.
When you found out that she had put her house up for sale, you must have realized she is in this very deep.
Yeah. So I'm stuck knowing that she is involved in something horrible and she can't see it.
On October 9th, 2018, Colleen died by suicide, 2 years after meeting who she thought was the man of her dreams, Ryan, online. But what Karen and Colleen could never have known is that the people behind the scam have all the markings of a violent international mafia called the Black Axe. It's a shadowy organization that was thrust into the spotlight in the summer of 2019, as the FBI led 2 separate busts, including one called Operation Rewired, arresting 361 suspected scammers in the US and around the world, including Nigeria, Turkey, France, the UK. Among the charges, money laundering, bank fraud, and aggravated identity theft related to romance scams. In Italy, the Black Axe is so powerful that it's been declared a mafia organization. In that country, the specialty is sex trafficking. And as 2 detectives in Toronto uncovered, they also have chapters in Canada.
Everyone appears to be armed with something on both rows. And of course,
Detectives Mike Kelly and Tim Trotter became experts on the Black Axe after a run-of-the-mill investigation into lottery scams in Toronto in 2014.
Was there one moment where you were like, oh my God, we have stumbled across something far bigger than we ever could have imagined?
But there was no sort of aha, like real, genuine, like I have an idea of how big it was until we started piecing together the investigation involving Akahoman.
This is Akahoman Igadozi, a 45-year-old Canadian citizen.
So this came from your iPad. Remember when you got arrested back in August?
Being interrogated by detectives Trotter and Kelly for more than an hour after he was arrested at Pearson Airport in 2014, trying to travel to the US with fake ID.
A border guard inspected his wallet as he was leaving and found a credit card that wasn't in his name, as well as some documentation that caused some concern that he might be involved in fraud and money laundering. As a result of his arrest on those charges, I wound up writing search warrants for his electronic devices.
And you end up finding a treasure trove in his electronic devices that shows you a network that I'm guessing you couldn't have even imagined existed at that point.
No, you're talking in one particular chat for over 4,000 lines of communications and furtherance of scams and best practices and how to carry it out. And within all those chats was another chat, what turned out to be a romance scam victim here in the city of Toronto.
The victim reported starting out on a dating website.
A Toronto woman who had a PhD and had worked for the United Nations, victimized much the way Colleen had been, conned out of $600,000. Also on those chats, evidence that scammers around the world were working in unison to rip people off, transferring huge amounts of money between countries.
When you're looking at this network that you say the fraudster that the woman is dealing with is sort of the tip of this massive iceberg, how far out does that iceberg go?
This particular Toronto victim dealt with individuals operating here in Toronto, individuals operating in Ireland, and individuals operating in Hong Kong. Those are just the ones that we have on the surface that we know about.
But the investigators were stumped by this one question.
Why is it that a bad guy in Toronto can convince a victim in the United States to wire $50,000 to Hong Kong, then $50,000 to Singapore, then $50,000 to Spain, and that other criminals around the world won't simply take that money and run away with it? It just seemed like a basic question of what holds that together. It was very clear that there was something more at play.
But it wasn't until the Toronto investigators stumbled across strange social media posts of Igadozi and some of his friends, especially this one associate, Norenzi Iribor, that it became clear just what more was at play.
A fantastic RCMP analyst happened upon Mr. Iribor's social media account, and in it there were just images throughout of him wearing these funny berets and these scarves.
Detectives Trotter and Kelly take us inside their investigation, giving a slideshow presentation of the social media photos that first tipped them off. Strange hats, logos, hands held up to form an X. The detectives analyzed it all and learned for the first time about the feared organization called the Black Axe.
Here's a picture of Mr. Iribor openly wearing his Black Axe beret and military fatigues. The captions next to this were friends of his giving shout-outs in relation to the Black Axe and sort of implying that all the roads in and out of Toronto were wide open for them.
Not only was Toronto considered to be open for business, the social media posts show the criminal organization held a conference right behind a Toronto police building.
You see they've got the conference swag bags there.
They've even got towels with their insignia on it.
The towels with the insignia, and you see the canvas bag that they're holding, all while wearing the berets.
And this?
This was the only outside shot that we were given to say it was in Toronto.
Black Axe was right under their noses, and according to police, operating romance and money laundering scams and counterfeiting operations for years in Canada, completely off the radar. Police say this plaza is a meeting place for the group.
There are a lot of people who will be hearing for the very first time about Black Axe. How much money are they ripping Canadians off of every year? Any way of figuring that out?
Well, through conversations that we've had with an individual within an executive position that would have knowledge of the financial dealings of the group, said that, and it wasn't entirely clear whether it was Canada or North America, the amount that we were told was between $100 and $300 million a year.
But that number is believed to run into the billions when factoring in the global operations.
Where do the tentacles of Black Axe spread throughout this world?
We understand them to have a presence in 26 countries around the world. They have a presence here in Toronto as well as out in Vancouver. They have official zones. Here in Canada, their primary activities appear to center around fraud and money laundering.
And car theft. The year after detectives Trotter and Kelly uncovered the Black Axe in Canada, there was a multi-jurisdictional sting targeting a massive car theft ring operating in the Greater Toronto area.
It is worth noting that this particular group was determined to have direct links to a notorious organized crime group known as the Black Axe. Originating in Nigeria, the Black Axe now has international reach and is known for engaging in large-scale fraud and money laundering scams.
Police made 18 arrests in that 2015 bust, but the Black Axe is behind much more than just romance scams and car frauds. This is an organization that strikes fear amongst those who know about it.
There are people who are scared to even say the word Black Axe.
You can understand the fears. I think a lot of it depends on whether or not they have chapters where you live.
Professor Temitope Oriola is a criminologist at the University of Alberta who has researched the organization that began as a fraternity on campuses in Nigeria decades ago.
Fraternities in Nigeria began in the early 1950s. The aims were very lofty and they were quite idealistic. They wanted to raise generations of leaders that would metaphorically lead Africa into the promised land, and they recruited some of the top academic performers.
For decades, Nigeria was in the grips of political upheaval and military violence that spread onto university campuses.
So you had generations of groups of young men and women who were educated in the university system of those days, graduated to find that there were no jobs.
Unable to find jobs, they spread out in countries around the world, all the while continuing to pledge allegiance to the increasingly militant and criminal Black Axe.
I think most Canadians would be shocked to hear that that person doing the scamming from Nigeria is actually in their own city, in Toronto or in Calgary or in Vancouver.
Oh, absolutely. Nigeria is simply the name of the franchise. When it comes to financial scams, online scams, romance scams, Nigeria has become a transcendental enclave. It is everywhere but nowhere.
It feels as though the Black Axe hasn't really been on the radar in the justice system. Why do you think that is?
That may well be a fundamental element of its genius. You're dealing with an insidious and subterranean collection of individuals and working almost tirelessly to remain under the radar. Its capacity to remain beneath the surface is a part of its genius.
Back in Toronto, detectives Trotter and Kelly say their one big investigation into the Black Axe netted 30 arrests, enough to make a small dent in local operations.
And I think in the end, we rocked their boat. We didn't sink it, but we rocked it significantly.
Coming up,
These are masters of psychological trickery and deceit.
more broken hearts when the truth is discovered.
And they said, yes, this man is not real. You have been scammed.
When W5 continues. CTV's W5. Here is Avery Haines.
Welcome back. We've seen the heartbreak and the tragedy that romance scams are causing. Now we continue our investigation into the criminal organization behind them.
Mary Burnt is meeting with her dressmaker, Jean, the woman who made her a dress for a wedding that never happened.
Well, I really felt sorry for her.
You okay?
Yeah, it just kind of takes me back. A little bit of a humbling experience, I guess.
Mary was left brokenhearted and in debt after realizing that the colonel she had fallen in love with online didn't exist. Just like Colleen in British Columbia, who died by suicide after being manipulated out of almost $1 million, Mary in Ontario was tricked by sophisticated scammers who broke her heart and robbed her blind.
I got an Instagram message, and it was a picture of this nice-looking man, and so I messaged back.
The man said he was a soldier serving in Afghanistan. His supposed name, Antonio Conte. The pictures he sent were of a fit, handsome man, and he doted on Mary.
What sorts of things are you talking about?
It started off really light, like just your everyday chat back and forth through text, you know? And then it would be more, he would say, do you mind if I be more forward with you, dear? That I am having feelings for you. It was always my queen and my
Mary fell head over heels, flattered by the constant online attention. And soon, she's planning a wedding, with Antonio involved at every step, even helping her pick the design of her dress, texting her that he wants to cry, it's so beautiful. But Mary is told that before the wedding can happen, the military needs to be paid to secure her soldier boyfriend's release.
He says, they said they'll release me right after. He says, then I'll pay off your loan and any other debts you got, I'll take care of.
Mary went to private lenders to raise 15,000 American dollars. But after she had transferred the cash, she was told her fiancé's life was in danger and she needed to send more money. That's when Mary did some research and ended up on Scam Haters United, a website that posts photos that have been stolen by scammers to rip people off.
I sent them pictures, and they said, yes, this man is not real. You have been scammed. I did not expect myself to fall for something like this. I've seen these things on documentaries and stuff. I said, look at that, poor soul. Who would be silly enough to fall for that?
Mary stopped all communication with the scammers, but W5 has learned these very images have been used to create thousands of fake profiles by romance scammers. According to the RCMP's Anti-Fraud Center, in 2018, an estimated 15,000 to 20,000 Canadians were ripped off in romance frauds. Yet fewer than 1,000 of those victims reported the crime to police, with recorded losses of $22 million. And the scammers, including the sophisticated international crime syndicate, the Black Axe, have a penchant for using American soldiers as the face of their deceit.
It's enormous. We've dealt with hundreds of these over the past 6 or 7 years. We quickly realized that soldiers' identities were being stolen and scammers were doing this on a global scale.
Christopher Gray is the Chief Public Affairs Officer in the U.S. Army's Criminal Investigation Command in Quantico, Virginia.
This crime of romance scams, of scammers using American military personnel to rip women off, is so vast that the U.S. military has actually issued a directive to soldiers.
Yeah, we do a lot of work to help soldiers out to make sure that they protect their identities, they lock down their social media accounts, they try not to take photographs a lot and put it on social media in their uniforms or with their name tape showing.
It's a warning that came too late for Brian Denny.
I retired as a colonel for the United States Army just 2 years ago.
In 2016, Denny, who lives in Virginia, made a disturbing discovery about the photos he'd posted on Facebook.
A lady in Canada contacted me. She said, yeah, you're supposed to come see me. You're serving in Syria, and I've got tickets. You're supposed to come visit me in 2 weeks.
Scammers like the Black Axe had hijacked the pictures he had uploaded to Facebook to keep in touch with friends and family. Colonel Denny's face was used to create more than 3,000 fake profiles. Denny's pictures are the only constant. The scammers use different names to go along with those photos. Denny Bequilos, Prince Leslie, Mark Denny, the list is endless.
Did you have any idea when you first did that search how many people were using your face to rip off women?
No, I had no idea. I've never heard of this before. I never envisioned this happening. I didn't know this kind of scam existed.
You are the face of thousands and thousands of heartbreaks.
It's tough. It's really tough. I mean, you're the bearer of bad news, heartbreaking news, financially crippling news every week.
No matter how many profiles he reports to Facebook, there are always more popping up. He knows Colonel Denny will always be used to rip people off.
The pictures never age. The pictures won't change. This is a part of my life for the rest of my life.
The scammers choose professions like soldiers or oil rig workers because it's a built-in excuse to delay a real-life meeting. They're on the battlefield or out at sea. It's the specialty of groups like the notorious Black Axe Mafia, which has an international secret network to facilitate elaborate schemes and to move money around the world.
So what happens when the tables get turned and the scammers get scammed themselves? Well, we've traveled thousands of kilometers to meet a man who has done what no one else has done before: infiltrate the Black Axe by posing as one of them online. Now, he doesn't want you to see his face. He doesn't even want you to know what country we're in. And that's because since he started posting what he's learned about this organization, he has been inundated with death threats. Were you scared coming here to meet me?
Yes.
You were?
Yes. On a couple of occasions, it crossed my mind that maybe the email had been spoofed and it might not be Canada television waiting for me.
He calls himself Uche Tobias, a financial crimes analyst who is public enemy #1 when it comes to the Black Axe.
Well, I've had a lot of death threats from them over the years. I think one year I got 400 death threats, and there was quite some imaginative ones of them describing in good detail what they wanted to do to me.
400 death threats in 1 year?
Yes.
What sorts of things were they saying to you?
They were saying that they were going to kill all my family. They said they were going to behead me and do not so nice things with my body afterwards.
Uche Tobias has, saved on his computer, everything from his time pretending to be a Black Axeman online.
Do you have any of the specific threats against you?
Yeah, absolutely. You will beg for mercy. You will not see the axe that will pierce through your skull. Like you see in the movie, your generations will be wiped out. I will lick your blood and chew your eye sockets.
That's terrifying to have that directed at you.
Yeah, they are trying to identify me and would shut me up given half a chance. They like to operate in secrecy. I'd come out and expose them.
It all started in 2011 when Uche encountered a member of the Black Axe online while working in corporate intelligence.
I was able to intercept some communications, and about 95% of the people were identifying themselves quite readily as being a member of the Black Axe.
Using information from those exchanges, Uche hacked and took over inactive Black Axe email accounts. He received invites to their disturbing secret chat forums.
How did they talk about the women they were ripping off?
Oh, they would often laugh, and they'd refer to them as the Mugu, which is a big fool. They don't shed any tears when there's a suicide or when they've stolen as much money as they can off somebody.
Cold-blooded con artists who Uche managed to infiltrate, untangling the hierarchy that exists in each Black Axe zone, operating in at least 26 countries, including Canada.
At the top there is the head, and underneath him there are a number of what they call elders.
So what does the chief priest do?
The chief priest is responsible for ceremonial actions.
The butcher, obviously, that's self-explanatory. What's this one? The
Ihaza is like a financial secretary.
And the eye?
The eye is responsible for the security of the zone. Sort of like a counter-intelligence sort of role.
So all of this exists at the zones in Toronto and Montreal?
Yes.
What we weren't expecting when we met Uche is that he would provide the clearest evidence yet that Colleen's scam was the work of the Black Axe. Because how Colleen was conned is pulled right out of the Black Axe playbook. Before her death by suicide, she was romanced by a charismatic man online, tricked out of nearly $1 million to secure a trunk of money, a storyline that Uche has seen many times before.
These fake characters will have vast amounts of cash in a trunk box somewhere, and they'll need $500 or $1,000 for various certificates.
This is exactly what happened to Colleen.
Yeah.
This is a common narrative?
Yeah, the trunk format, yeah. But they'll give various evidence that it's moving. So maybe it's flown from Iraq to Germany, and they'll have the airport bills and such, and they'll have almost a paper trail of supposed evidence for this trunk having moved closer to them.
Colleen was up against an entire network of people whose only job was to convince her that this scam was real.
When people hear stories about women giving away their life savings to a man that they've never met, they make a judgment on her. The reality is that these guys are sophisticated at what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. The internet scamming on a truly industrial scale. Some members would have sometimes 1,000 work boxes that were dedicated to impersonating various officials, various lawyers, or various organizations to carry out these quite sophisticated frauds. These are masters of this art form of psychological trickery and deceit.
Coming up,
They knew what happened because she left that letter in her car.
A suicide leaves unanswered questions.
Why didn't police even open her computer? Why didn't they investigate the fraud?
When W5 continues.
Karen Ringham tends to her garden in the days leading up to the one-year anniversary of her sister's suicide. Colleen was a vivacious 61-year-old who was left destitute after giving away every penny she owned, about $1 million, in an elaborate romance scam. Karen has been haunted by the fact she knew her sister was being ripped off, but couldn't do anything to stop it.
I was searching to try to find somebody to help me make her understand. And the only thing that came to my mind was somebody in a uniform, being the RCMP.
2 years the scam was playing out. Karen says the RCMP were called 3 separate times by family and friends, begging for help.
Well, I called the RCMP. I didn't know who to call for help. They said, print off some other romance scams that you've seen on the internet. Maybe bring that, present that to her.
But the pamphlets did nothing, and so Karen called the RCMP again.
And they actually went to her place of business, and they took her away and took her for assessment.
Colleen was released. She could not be convinced that Ryan wasn't real. The RCMP were called a 3rd time when Colleen suddenly sold her house.
They sent a liaison officer out to her home to talk to her about scams and left her brochures.
3 interactions with the RCMP. The 4th was when Colleen was found dead in her car in 2018.
Did anybody say, we need to scour through her computer, look at the IP address, try to find out who's behind this?
No, they didn't. And they knew what happened because she left that letter in her car, and the RCMP read that letter and knew that she had passed on due to a scam.
Karen couldn't get into her sister's laptop because it was password protected. So she gave it to us to do what the police failed to do, analyze it. We took Colleen's computer to forensic analyst Matthew Musters with the Toronto company Computer Forensics, Inc.
There's an enormous amount of information available on your personal devices that most people don't realize is even there.
Matthew is able to get into Colleen's computer in an astonishingly short amount of time, less than 1 second. Matthew then makes a clone of Colleen's hard drive.
Everything Colleen did, her chats, her search history, emails, it's all on this hard drive.
All stored in little files inside of that hard drive.
Colleen's online footprint, the documents she erased, the chat she had on the phone she had backed up to her computer, all here. And the picture that's painted during this online forensic investigation is haunting.
This right here is the last Google search that she made.
The last Google search conducted on this computer prior to her death was for BC Protection Order Registry.
Searches for how to get a restraining order, a woman's shelter, and repeated searches for the RCMP. Colleen clearly believed she was in real danger. But the data from Colleen's phone reveals even more.
We can see everybody that she's really talking to on this program, what their names are. We can pull up their chats, we can export it.
This is Ryan.
That's Ryan, yeah, and he's one of the top contacts on this phone.
So can we see what she was communicating with him, what she was saying to him, what he was saying to her?
Sure, absolutely. So we can see that there are about just over 5,000 events.
Matthew's search also reveals a piece of information that could have been useful to police: the name of a legitimate dating site where Colleen was lured by her invisible man.
Hello, dear, it's me, Ryan. You just gave me your number on Scout.
So Scout is a dating application.
Within just minutes, we have realized where they met. Clearly, Ryan has had an account with Scout. That's a pretty big piece of evidence that you've just discovered.
The next step in this case would be to issue a production order to Scout and have them tell us any information that they have about this user named Ryan Scott.
This is key information that could have helped track down who did this to Colleen?
Sure. There's likely a good amount of information that Scout has that we don't have here.
All of this potential evidence that could have led to Colleen's scammers. Why didn't police even open her computer? Why didn't they investigate the fraud? W5 issued a very clear request to the RCMP to discuss specifics of Colleen's case. We were granted an interview with Guy Paul LaRocque, the RCMP's mass marketing and major fraud coordinator in Ottawa. What can you tell me about the RCMP investigation into the death by suicide of Colleen and the defrauding of almost $1 million of her dollars?
Unfortunately, through Privacy Act, we're not allowed to speak of specific cases.
We were really clear when we reached out to you that one of the things we wanted to talk about was the suicide of Colleen and what the RCMP did to investigate her death.
I can't because, I don't have consent from the victim herself to be able to speak about it.
The victim is dead.
I understand, and it's very unfortunate that it came out to that result. And it's very, how can I explain that in simple terms, but it is very bothering when the victims comes and commits suicide.
You can't tell me anything about how the RCMP handled her death and the fact that she was defrauded of $1 million?
No, I can't.
Because of privacy laws? Because she's dead?
Exactly. I need proper consent from the victim, which is unfortunate.
In a follow-up statement, the RCMP told W5 they had limited options to investigate while Colleen was alive because of her insistence that she was not a victim of a fraud. They also state the RCMP does not have a mandate to pursue individual cases. None of this comes as a surprise to Uche Tobias, the man who infiltrated and exposed one of the primary romance scam organizations, the Black Axe.
How difficult would it be for police to track down who's on the other end of these emails?
Well, I believe it would be fairly easy if they attached the manpower and the willingness and determination to do so. But because the crimes were happening over various countries, you'd perhaps have a victim in one country, one of the scammers in another country. The information gets passed around like a hot potato, and it's very rare that something gets done.
In fact, Uche Tobias tried to share what he had learned about the Black Axe with police agencies, but they weren't interested. And so instead, he's created a website to expose all of Black Axe's secrets online, including posts they had made about violent crimes they were involved in.
In the Canada zone, there was an instance of a Black Axe member raping a 12-year-old girl, and they moved as an organization to cover that up for him, and he fled Canada.
Wow, and this was all information that you had gleaned from having infiltrated the Black Axe. And so he never saw justice?
As far as I know, he fled to Nigeria.
Few arrests in Canada are ever made. A lack of resources, and in cases, a lack of will, combined with the fact victims rarely come forward. Mary, who was planning her dream wedding, didn't even go to the police. She didn't think they'd take her seriously. And so organizations like the Black Axe can, for the most part, destroy lives with impunity.
And it's coming up.
It has been 1 year since Karen Ringham's sister Colleen died by suicide, the victim of a romance scam that robbed her of everything and by the end had her fearing that she was about to be arrested.
When you think of the invisible man, as you call him, Ryan, what are your thoughts?
I'm sure he's off doing it to somebody else. And this whole scam, it worked. They had a woman hooked here for 22 months. We got almost $1 million. You know, she's left a lot of loved ones behind. Over something like, over an invisible person.
Remember Tommy Keene, the Canadian man whose images were used to con Colleen? Well, we managed to track him down, and he says his identity has been stolen dozens of times over the years by romance scammers. He did not know about Colleen's tragedy until we broke the news to him. You can watch that powerful interview on our website at w5.ctvnews.ca. We'll be right back.